Invasion of the Crimson Sisters. The night sky had never looked so alive. Across the horizon, streaks of crimson light carved through the darkness, bending reality with their unnatural glow. People across the northern hemisphere looked up, mesmerized, unaware of the meaning of the lights, dismissing them as auroras or meteor showers. Yet the lights were not natural. They pulsed with life, moving with a precision no celestial body could possess, and carried an intelligence that seeped into the minds of those who watched too long. When the first massive ships appeared, descending from the heavens with a grace that belied their size, the world realized that nothing it had prepared for could withstand what was coming. The ships were black as obsidian, with surfaces that seemed liquid yet solid, reflecting the stars in impossible ways. Lights that resembled eyes moved along their hulls, scanning the surface of Earth as if calculating the value of every living thing. These were the Crimson Sisters, and their arrival marked the beginning of an apocalypse unlike any humanity had imagined. The deserts of Nevada were the first to bear the brunt of the invasion. Sand erupted into crimson storms as the ships touched the Earth, their landing sites shimmering with energy that warped the terrain itself. The first humans to approach were never seen again. The few who survived the initial assault spoke of beings humanoid in shape, but terrifying in their perfection, their skin a vivid crimson that seemed to pulse in time with some alien heartbeat, their eyes molten gold that stripped away all pretense of safety. Major Elena Cruz observed the descending fleet from orbit, her mind processing the alien geometry of the ships with the efficiency trained by years of military service. She recognized the threat not in its size or weaponry, but in its intelligence. The movements of the ships were calculated, precise, as though each sister was connected to a greater will, a hive consciousness that had already analyzed every weakness humanity possessed. Yet, even amidst the fear, a flicker of exhilaration stirred in her chest. Humanity had faced impossible odds before. It had survived. Perhaps it could survive this too. In the early days, human resistance was chaotic. Fighter jets engaged the sisters with conventional weapons, missiles detonating harmlessly against hulls that seemed to absorb or redirect energy. Tanks rolled across deserts, attempting to meet the invaders in direct combat, but the sisters' speed and agility outmatched every maneuver. Cities braced under a siege that combined psychological terror with physical devastation. The Crimson Sisters did not merely attack. They harvested. They drained life essence from the planet, leaving hollow, lifeless husks behind. Each encounter left survivors more desperate, more determined, and more aware that their ingenuity was the only weapon capable of turning the tide. In the midst of chaos, small groups of humans began to organize. Survivors gathered in abandoned structures, from empty casinos in Las Vegas to underground bunkers beneath crumbling cities. They scavenged what remained, repurposing civilian machinery into weapons and improvising defenses against an enemy that could not be predicted. Among them, Elena's presence became a symbol of resistance. She moved with purpose, observing the invaders, understanding their behavior, and translating fear into strategy. Each small victory, whether reclaiming a building or disrupting a drone patrol, reinforced a crucial truth. Humans were adaptable. Capable of ingenuity the sisters could not anticipate. Reconnaissance became the cornerstone of survival. Using drones, humans infiltrated landing zones to study the invaders, discovering patterns in their movements and behavior. The sisters performed what appeared to be rituals, manipulating energy fields and bending the landscape into designs that were both alien and horrifying. At first, the humans assumed these actions were purely destructive, but subtle patterns suggested an intelligence that could be influenced, perhaps even manipulated. The realization sparked hope. If the sisters could be deceived, if their decisions could be anticipated, then humanity had a chance not merely to survive, but to resist. The first incursions into the central landing sites revealed the full scale of the sisters' operation. Towers of light rose from the desert floor, each connected by tendrils of energy that hummed with life. Within, humans found cocoons suspended in luminescence, containing those who had been captured. The people within were alive but drained, their bodies suspended in a state between life and death. The process was methodical, alien, and terrifying, yet it revealed a vulnerability. The sisters operated on systems, rules, and patterns. These could be studied, manipulated, and eventually exploited. Humans began to experiment. Small devices were improvised to interfere with the sisters' energy fields, creating illusions and delays in their movements. The sisters, capable of immense physical power, proved susceptible to manipulation of their sensory inputs. Every success emboldened the survivors, transforming fear into strategy. The desert, once a place of death and despair, became a testing ground for human ingenuity. The world beyond Nevada suffered. Cities fell under the weight of the invasion, infrastructure collapsing as the sisters harvested resources, both biological and technological. Yet the human spirit endured. The chaos forced the survivors to adapt at a pace no alien could anticipate. Makeshift communities thrived in underground shelters, sharing knowledge, improving weaponry, and training to confront the next wave of attacks. Humanity's unpredictability became its greatest advantage, a trait the sisters had not accounted for. In the deepest part of the central hive, the humans discovered the nature of the sisters' operation. The architecture was alive, pulsating with energy that mirrored the crimson of their skin. Passageways shifted, walls flowed, and the air was thick with a presence that was felt more than seen. It was within these corridors that the captives were stored, and it was here that humans confronted the horror of the invasion. Not mere destruction, but systematic assimilation. Yet the humans pressed forward, guided by a mixture of desperation and determination. With each successful disruption, the humans learned more about the invaders. The sisters' hierarchy, once inscrutable, revealed subtle patterns. Leaders displayed curiosity, even admiration, for acts of intelligence and bravery. Humans realized that the fight need not rely solely on weapons. It could exploit the aliens' own psychology, their appreciation for ingenuity. This insight transformed the nature of resistance. Survival became resistance, resistance became strategy, and strategy became victory. The final confrontations took place in a sprawling chamber at the heart of the hive. The largest sister, the Crimson Queen, observed the intruders with a presence that filled the mind as much as the eyes. Humans moved with calculated precision, turning the alien systems against the sisters, forcing hesitation and confusion. The Queen, confronted with displays of courage, creativity, and relentless human spirit, began to falter. The retreat of the Crimson Sisters marked the first victory of humanity in the war. The skies cleared and the land, though scarred and altered, remained. The humans emerged from shelters, underground bunkers, and ruined cities, looking upon a world that had been tested and found resilient. Humanity had survived, not because it matched the aliens in power, but because it could defy expectations, adapt, and endure. Even in defeat, the sisters carried the lesson of Earth. Intelligence, courage, and unpredictability were forces that could not be conquered through physical might alone. In the dark expanse of space, the Crimson Queen's consciousness carried this understanding. A warning to all who might underestimate the species that had resisted annihilation and emerged unbroken. Humanity, for its part, learned that survival was not merely a function of strength, but of resilience, creativity, and unity. The desert winds carried the echoes of battles fought and won, and the world, though forever changed, looked toward the future with a quiet determination. The night sky, once a canvas of fear, became a reminder of what had been endured, a symbol of what could be achieved when spirit, intelligence, and courage overcame even the most terrifying of foes. The days following the initial retreat of the sisters were filled with a tense, cautious vigilance. Humanity had survived the first wave, but the scars of the invasion ran deep. Cities were reduced to skeletal frameworks, deserts were scorched with alien energy, and millions of lives had been lost or altered beyond recognition. The survivors moved through the remnants of the world, scavenging, repairing, and fortifying what remained. Every ruined building, every charred landscape, became a classroom in the brutal curriculum of survival, teaching lessons that no simulation or drill could provide. In the deserts of Nevada, human settlements began to take shape among the ruins of alien structures. The survivors learned to use the abandoned alien technology, devices that pulsed with unfamiliar energy and seemed to respond to thought patterns. Small communities of humans operated as self-contained units, sharing knowledge of the aliens' abilities, weaknesses, and habits. Adaptation became instinct, and instinct became a weapon. The Crimson Sisters had left behind fragments of their hive. These fragments were alive in ways that were difficult to comprehend, growing and evolving even without the full presence of their species. Humans discovered that these remnants could be studied, manipulated, and even used to create defensive networks. The very tools of the invaders became instruments of human resilience. At night, the desert glowed faintly with alien luminescence. Humans learned to navigate by it, using the light to track energy pulses to anticipate the return of any residual alien presence. The nights were long and terrifying, filled with the whispered hum of alien energy and the distant shifting of structures that had once been static. Sleep became rare and vigilance became ritual. Yet even in these conditions, human ingenuity thrived. Makeshift energy shields were built, using a combination of scavenged alien tech and Earth-made electronics. Traps and decoys were crafted to mislead any returning sisters, exploiting the patterns observed in the previous engagements. The survivors also discovered that the sisters had a psychological vulnerability. They were fascinated by intelligence, curiosity, and creativity. Actions that displayed courage, adaptability, or cleverness disrupted the invaders' routines and hierarchy. This knowledge transformed human strategy from reactive defense to proactive disruption. Entire operations were planned not merely to survive, but to exploit the aliens' admiration for cleverness, turning the hive's own priorities against it. In the deeper canyons and valleys where the alien ships had once landed, the ground pulsed with lingering energy. Humans mapping these areas discovered vast subterranean networks, tunnels, and chambers that had been used to process captured humans and harvest planetary resources. The walls of these chambers were alive, pulsating with crimson light, and the air carried a low-frequency resonance that affected human perception. Explorers reported dizziness, hallucinations, and heightened senses, phenomena that were exploited to avoid traps or navigate unseen corridors. Every foray into these structures was dangerous, yet necessary. Knowledge was survival. The world outside the desert continued to reel from the invasion. Coastal cities struggled with blackouts and energy disruptions, while temperate regions experienced strange weather patterns induced by residual alien technology. Humans adapted to these environmental shifts, learning to harness the altered conditions to their advantage. Deserts were used as training grounds, forests as ambush zones, and cities as experimental arenas for integrating alien technology into defensive strategies. The Crimson Sisters' method of harvesting life essence was a slow, deliberate process. Humans discovered that it relied on precise energy harmonics, patterns that could be disrupted with ingenuity. Using rudimentary devices, they created false energy signatures, mimicking the presence of life where none existed, drawing the sisters away from populated areas. Each successful misdirection saved countless lives and provided valuable data for future encounters. Despite the horrors faced, the human spirit remained unbroken. Survivors documented their experiences, creating networks of information that allowed isolated communities to anticipate alien strategies. Maps were drawn, energy patterns recorded, and behavioral tendencies cataloged. The process of survival became a discipline, a science of adaptation that humans honed with precision. Meanwhile, the remnants of the Crimson Sisters began to show signs of evolution. Smaller units operated autonomously, testing the defenses humans had established, probing weaknesses, and attempting to reclaim lost territory. Each skirmish was brief but intense, a clash of intelligence and instinct. Humans learned that the invaders were not merely physically superior, they were adaptable, capable of learning from encounters. Yet humans proved equally adaptable, responding to each new strategy with countermeasures born of observation, analysis, and intuition. The landscapes of conflict became arenas of transformation. Desert valleys were scarred with energy conduits, glowing tunnels, and partially destroyed alien structures that humans used as fortresses. Cities were reconstructed with layers of alien and human technology, creating hybrid systems of defense and observation. Every day, humanity became a little stronger, a little more unpredictable, and a little closer to reclaiming the planet. In one valley, where the Earth had been carved into impossible geometric patterns by alien energy, humans discovered a central node, a nexus of power that had once coordinated multiple sisters. The node radiated energy that influenced the surrounding terrain, and humans realized that controlling it could disrupt the sisters' operations across vast regions. The first attempts were dangerous. The energy emitted pulses that disoriented, burned, or even paralyzed intruders. Yet through trial and error, humans learned to shield themselves and interact with the node, gradually mastering the alien energy and turning it into a tool for counteroffense. The psychological toll was immense. Survivors carried memories of friends lost, cities destroyed, and horrors witnessed. Yet even in despair, the process of adaptation transformed fear into purpose. Every small victory, from reclaiming a building to manipulating alien energy, reinforced the lesson that survival depended not on brute force, but on resilience, creativity, and relentless observation. Humanity's understanding of the Crimson Sisters deepened with each encounter. The hive intelligence, once assumed to be singular and uniform, revealed layers of hierarchy, specialization, and social complexity. Leaders exhibited curiosity, sentries enforced patterns, and scouts adapted in real time. Humans began to anticipate movements, exploit weaknesses, and create strategies that leveraged unpredictability. The battlefield became a chessboard, and humans discovered that their greatest weapon was not power, but adaptability. In regions where alien energy still pulsed, strange phenomena occurred. Trees glowed faintly, sand shifted with a life of its own, and underground rivers carried traces of alien influence. Humans navigated these anomalies carefully, learning to read the subtle signs, interpreting movement, and predicting changes. The survivors transformed the once hostile landscapes into extensions of their intelligence, using alien energy to mask their presence, create false signals, and establish strongholds in previously dangerous areas. As months passed, humans became not only survivors but also teachers. Information flowed between communities, each success, failure, and observation shared through covert networks. Knowledge of the aliens' patterns, energy systems, and hierarchy became a collective consciousness, enabling coordinated action across vast distances. Even as remnants of the sisters lingered in isolated areas, humans prepared for the eventual return, armed not with mere weapons, but with understanding, strategy, and unity. The invasion had scarred the planet, but it had also forged a species capable of extraordinary resilience. Humans had faced an enemy whose strength was incomprehensible, whose methods were alien in every sense, and whose presence was terrifying beyond imagination. Yet through observation, adaptation, and unyielding determination, humanity endured. The deserts, cities, forests, and mountains had become both classrooms and laboratories, teaching lessons that no manual or training could replicate, and in the quiet moments, when the night sky was free of alien craft and the wind carried only the sounds of the earth, humans looked upward and understood a truth that could never be erased. Strength alone did not ensure survival. Intelligence, creativity, and the will to endure were the forces that defined the species. The Crimson Sisters had underestimated them, and in that miscalculation, humans had discovered a power greater than any weapon or technology, the unpredictable, relentless spirit of life itself. The long months after the initial retreat of the Crimson Sisters brought no true peace. The skies had grown quiet, but the silence was heavy with the weight of expectation. Humanity understood instinctively that the sisters were not gone. They had withdrawn, reorganized, and observed. They would return, not as scattered forces, but as something more deliberate, more coordinated, more dangerous. And humanity, shaped by survival, was no longer what it had been either. The world was transformed into a labyrinth of hybrid structures, half human and half alien. Cities were wrapped in webs of energy shields derived from the sisters' own technology. Underground bunkers pulsed with light drawn from captured nodes, their glow faint but steady, like the heartbeat of a species refusing to die. In the deserts, the remnants of alien ships had been turned into silent fortresses, their curved obsidian hulls repurposed to protect the people they had once sought to erase. Humanity had not only adapted, it had learned to claim the enemy's strength as its own. At the same time, the psychological memory of the invasion grew sharper rather than fading. Survivors remembered the sight of crimson-skinned figures walking through fire, the soundless hum of ships that cut the sky, the unbearable pressure of alien minds touching human thought. The fear did not vanish. It hardened into something else. It became fuel. It became focus. Every person who remembered the sisters carried that memory like armor. The return came in a way that mirrored the first invasion, but was far more controlled. The crimson streaks did not scatter across the night sky this time. They came in straight lines, descending with a unity that spoke of strategy. Their ships were larger, their formations tighter, their descent eerily silent. The world watched, in grim silence as the red light spread across the horizon once again, reflecting in the windows of fortified cities and the steel of makeshift defenses. Humanity had been waiting. The first landings were met not with confusion and chaos, but with calculated resistance. Hidden energy disruptors activated simultaneously across continents, creating false life signatures that pulled the invaders toward empty regions. Massive illusions danced across abandoned fields, fooling the sisters into deploying forces against phantoms. Human strategies no longer relied on brute force. They relied on misdirection, complexity, and unpredictability. The sisters encountered, not a frightened prey, but an opponent who had learned the language of their invasion. Beneath the deserts, deep in the tunnels once carved by alien energy, humanity's nerve centers pulsed with life. Networks of operators monitored every pulse of crimson light, tracking movements in real time. Data flowed across continents, feeding into algorithms built from months of observation. The sisters' patterns, once terrifying in their precision, were now mapped, understood, and countered. Humanity had spent the silence learning their enemy. The sisters descended with an intelligence unlike before. Their formations moved with frightening grace, their coordination seamless, their attacks sharper. They no longer lingered at the edges of cities, performing rituals or spreading their essence slowly. They struck at critical nodes, energy sources, and communication hubs. They sought to cut the head off the serpent before it could strike. Humanity understood this as well. Defensive networks anticipated the assaults, countering with waves of interference and carefully placed traps that disrupted the aliens' psychic unity. The desert once again became the center of the world's conflict. It was there that the first decisive engagements unfolded, not in the form of battles as humans had known them, but as layered encounters of intelligence, perception, and manipulation. Alien ships hovered low, scanning landscapes laced with human misdirection. Energy waves collided invisibly. Battles fought not only with weapons, but with the manipulation of space, energy, and thought. The sisters found their senses deceived, their perfect coordination fraying at the edges. But they adapted quickly. The hive consciousness pulsed stronger than before, drawing on lessons learned from their first defeat. They began to anticipate the misdirections, unraveling the illusions with unnerving speed. The skies over the deserts turned blood red as energy fields collided and twisted the air itself into vibrating heat. The humans, hidden beneath the surface and scattered across fortified strongholds, responded with the one advantage no algorithm could predict: the chaos of human thought. Individual operators made decisions based not on patterns but on instinct, disrupting the hive's ability to predict. They overloaded energy grids at moments of their choosing, sacrificing entire sections of decoy cities to buy seconds of confusion. They changed frequencies, altered pulse patterns, and shifted tactics faster than the hive could process. Where, The sisters relied on unity. Humans thrived in unpredictability. And then the Crimson Queen returned. Her presence was felt long before it was seen. The sky dimmed as if aware of her arrival. The psychic pressure she exuded rippled through the world like a storm, pressing against the edges of human minds. The Queen had learned, too. She no longer attempted to dominate with sheer presence, but to infiltrate with precision. Minds at the edges of the battlefield felt whispers, visions, and temptations, carefully crafted not to terrify, but to weaken. Humanity had prepared for this as well. Psychic disruptors, built from fragments of alien nodes, pulsed in rhythmic patterns, dulling the Queen's reach. Her ship descended at the center of the original invasion site. The desert floor cracked as the black hull embedded itself in the ground, expanding outward in organic spirals that grew into towers of crimson light. The hive began to reform around her. Lesser sisters gathered, their gold eyes glowing brighter, their movements faster, their unity stronger. The Queen sought to rebuild what had been broken. Humanity sought to end it. From the deepest bunkers, humanity launched its counteroffensive. Swarms of drones disguised as biological signatures flooded the battlefield, overwhelming the sisters' senses. Energy disruptors rippled in unpredictable waves, fragmenting the hive's coordination. Human forces, scattered and mobile, moved, like ghosts beneath the sands, emerging only to strike at precise points before vanishing again. The war was no longer a contest of armies. It was a contest of cognition. As the battle intensified, the environment itself began to warp. The Queen's energy reshaped the desert, bending reality around the hive's structures. Towering spires of living metal rose from the earth, pulsing in harmony with her will. But humanity was no longer foreign to this landscape. Engineers, scientists, and survivors who had lived beneath these towers for months moved through the alien terrain with practiced familiarity. They exploited weak points, destabilized energy, conduits, and turned the hive's own architecture into traps. The hive responded with terrifying precision, releasing waves of energy that melted rock and boiled sand. Yet with each attack, the humans countered with something the hive could not predict: disorder. Individual human actors broke patterns intentionally, sabotaging the Queen's ability to synchronize her forces. Where one attack seemed obvious, another appeared in an unexpected place. Where she anticipated a retreat, humans advanced. Where she sought cohesion, she found chaos. The clash lasted not for hours, but for days. The desert became an ever-shifting battlefield of crimson and steel, of alien precision and human stubbornness. The Queen attempted to assert her will through sheer pressure, drawing power from the hive's core, reshaping the battlefield into a living extension of herself. Yet the more she tightened her grip, the more the humans slipped through. Deep beneath the surface, near the original node that humanity had claimed, the final confrontation began to take shape. The Queen directed her forces toward it, recognizing it as the true threat to her control. She sought to reclaim it, to sever humanity's access to the hive network once and for all. Humanity understood this as well. Every resource, every ounce of ingenuity, every learned lesson converged on that single point. The node pulsed brighter than ever, responding to the presence of the Queen's power. Its energy, once alien, now bore the fingerprints of human interference. It had become a hybrid, neither fully alien nor fully human, a testament to months of relentless adaptation. As the hive forces approached, the node began to resonate, amplifying the psychic dissonance that humans had learned to weaponize. The Queen felt her unity fray at the edges. Human forces above ground intensified their misdirections, drawing waves of sisters away from the node. In the confusion, small specialized teams penetrated the hive's defenses, destabilizing energy conduits and forcing the Queen to divert power from her assault. The hive structures, once seamless and perfect, began to flicker and twist. Crimson, Towers dimmed, their rhythm faltering under the weight of unpredictable interference. The Queen responded with fury, releasing psychic waves that could be felt across continents. Survivors thousands of miles away woke in terror, sensing her presence. Yet the closer she came to the node, the more unstable her power became. The human-altered energy network rejected her attempt to impose perfect order. She was powerful, but her perfection could not exist in a system built to favor imperfection. The humans surrounding the node held their ground. No single leader commanded them. No single strategy guided them. Their actions emerged from countless minds working in chaotic unison, driven by shared survival rather than centralized control. The hive could predict patterns, but it could not predict a storm of disordered will. The Queen made her final push, flooding the battlefield with her energy, attempting to overwrite the entire network. The ground shook, the sky turned crimson, and the air itself vibrated with the clash of incompatible systems. The node responded not with resistance, but with amplification. It embraced the chaos. The signals fragmented, multiplied, and spread through every inch of the hive structure. The Queen's perfect unity shattered against the storm of human unpredictability. The desert erupted in blinding light. The hive towers collapsed, their energy conduits unraveling in a cascade of uncontrolled feedback. The sisters faltered, their movements disoriented, their connection to the hive flickering and breaking. The Queen at the center absorbed the full force of the dissonance. For the first time, her presence wavered. She had not been defeated by superior strength, but by the one thing she could not control. The battle ended not with a final strike, but with a slow unraveling. The hive dissolved piece by piece, its structures turning into ash-like dust that scattered into the wind. The Queen's ship cracked open, its organic hull wilting like a dying creature. One by one, the crimson lights that had once filled the sky vanished into silence. Humanity stood amid the ruins, bruised and battered, but alive. The desert was scarred beyond recognition, carved into vast patterns of glass and ash. Yet in those scars lay the memory of a species that had refused to bend. The Queen had sought to impose perfection upon chaos, but chaos had prevailed. The survivors moved across the battlefield, not in triumph, but in quiet recognition of what had been endured. They collected fragments of alien technology, recorded the final energy signatures, and rebuilt their defenses. No one believed this was the end forever. The sisters existed somewhere beyond the stars, and they would remember. But humanity would remember too. The invasion ended not with a single climactic explosion, but with the slow unraveling of a force that had believed itself unchallenged. The Crimson Sisters had come to Earth as harvesters, their hives engineered to consume, reshape, and dominate. Yet they left as fragmented echoes, stripped of their control, undone not by superior strength but by an intelligence they had underestimated. Their crimson glow no longer filled the night skies. Their energy signatures faded into silence, and their hive networks crumbled under the weight of their own rigidity. The last remaining hive structures, pulsing with faint energy, were surrounded by human fortresses that no longer trembled at the sound of alien movement. The world was not the same. Entire continents bore the scars of the invasion. Deserts that had once been silent were carved with glowing trenches of alien energy. Cities that had once reached toward the sky now lay in twisted heaps of steel and crimson residue. Oceans bore strange discolorations where alien harvesting machinery had pierced the seabed. Forests grew wild around the bones of fallen hive constructs, slowly reclaiming the ground with roots and vines. Yet amid the ruin, there was a quiet persistence, a rhythm of life reasserting itself. Humanity emerged from the shadows of its ruined civilization with a new understanding of its place in the universe. It was no longer alone. The certainty of isolation was gone, replaced with the memory of the crimson glow and the hum of alien energy. The invasion had taught lessons written in fire, blood, and silence. Humanity had seen an intelligence older, colder, and far more methodical than its own, and had survived it. That survival had changed everything. The first efforts of rebuilding were quiet. There were no grand announcements, no loud declarations of victory, Survivors moved through broken landscapes with deliberate purpose, rebuilding piece by piece, stone by stone, circuit by circuit. In the ruins of shattered cities, they constructed hybrid structures that combined human architecture with alien material. The alien metals were resilient, energy-conductive, and adaptive, making them ideal for new infrastructure. Roads hummed faintly with leftover energy, buildings shimmered in the sunlight, and defense towers rose where once stood alien pylons. Where alien hives had been strongest, human research outposts now stood. The remnants of hive technology were dissected and studied, not for conquest, but for understanding. The alien energy sources, so efficient and devastating, became the foundation of a new technological era. Energy scarcity ceased to be the defining crisis of civilization. With careful containment and understanding, humanity learned to use the remnants of crimson energy as clean power. But it was not only technology that changed. The collective psychology of humanity shifted in ways no generation had experienced before. Nations no longer regarded their conflicts with the same gravity they once had. Political borders still existed, but the memory of a shared external enemy blurred the lines that had once divided billions. The world had been forced to stand together against something incomprehensible. The old divisions were weaker now, replaced by an underlying understanding that survival depended on unity, not isolation. The environment bore lasting marks. Alien harvesting machines had altered weather patterns, redirected water flows, and infused soils with unknown elements. In some regions, new ecosystems emerged, blending human and alien influences. Strange plants grew in the cracks of old highways, shimmering with faint luminescence at night. Some animals had adapted to feed on alien residue, glowing faintly in the darkness. The planet itself had absorbed the invasion and, in its own way, was evolving from it. For decades after, the crimson glow remained as ghostly traces across the globe, in forgotten tunnels, in half-collapsed hive structures, in the silent pulse of buried alien devices. They no longer posed a threat, but they were reminders etched into the bones of the world. Children grew up hearing stories of the invasion, not as myth, but as memory, passed down from those who had lived it. The last recorded pulse from the hive network came years after the final sister was extinguished. It was faint, almost like a heartbeat. Scientists who monitored it believed it was not an attack, not a return, but a fading echo, the last whisper of a species that had overreached and found resistance where it expected submission. The pulse drifted into the void of space, a ghost signal, perhaps reaching other hives in distant stars, perhaps vanishing into nothingness. Humanity did not fear it anymore. It simply recorded the signal and carried on. New cities rose. Not the sprawling, fragile constructs of the pre-invasion world, but layered fortresses of intelligence and adaptability. Power grids were decentralized, defense networks woven invisibly through the infrastructure, and observation systems constantly scanned the skies, not with fear, but with readiness. Every tower, every settlement, was built with the memory of the Crimson Invasion in its foundations. In the wastelands, nature returned in unexpected ways. Desert valleys became fertile where alien energy had cracked the ground open and exposed hidden water sources. Forests grew thick and untamed around hive ruins, shielding them like tombs. Oceans balanced themselves over time, cleansing the scars with currents and tides. The world healed, not perfectly, but persistently. Humanity changed too. Generations born after the invasion carried no direct memories of the terror, but they inherited its lessons in their architecture, their politics, their science, and their vigilance. The species was no longer naive about the cosmos. It was no longer bound by the illusion of safety. It had faced an apex predator and remained standing, and beneath this resilience lay something new: curiosity. If the Crimson Sisters had come from the stars, then there were other civilizations out there, some perhaps stronger, some weaker, some indifferent. Humanity no longer feared the night sky. It studied it. Probes were sent out, signals transmitted, archives compiled. Humanity had learned to survive, but it also yearned to understand. The invasion had begun as a harvest, but it had ended as an awakening. For those who had lived through it, the memory never dulled. They remembered the way the sky glowed crimson at night, the sound of alien machinery echoing through empty streets, the silence that followed the fall of each hive. They remembered the smell of scorched earth and the weight of survival. But they also remembered the quiet victories, the cleverness that outwitted the sisters, the resilience that turned fear into power. The Crimson Sisters had arrived as gods of war, harvesting worlds without resistance. They departed as a lesson written into the DNA of a species that would never again see itself as small. Humanity had not only survived, it had grown. And in the long silence that followed their departure, the earth exhaled slowly, as if awakening from a long and terrible dream. The stars above no longer felt distant or unreachable. They were a map of possibilities, some dangerous, some wondrous. Humanity was ready to face whatever came next. Not with blind confidence, but with the hard, enduring strength of a species forged in the shadow of invasion. The crimson light had faded, but its mark remained. Not as a wound, but as a scar, and scars are proof of survival.